Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program tonight, we have a packed program. First up, a judge in the United Kingdom rules that Nirav Modi can be extradited to India. There is still a fairly extensive appeal process available to Nirav Modi, but today is a victory for the system, our investigators, which pursued this case in the UK courts to try and bring back a scamster who defrauded our banks of 14,000 crore rupees, became a billionaire from nowhere, and then ended up effectively as a fugitive in the United Kingdom. Next up, India's new guidelines for digital media, for social media and streaming services seems to suggest that the government will be big brother in its role in regulating content. There are provisions which social media companies will feel are impossible to implement. For example, revealing the name of a person from whom a message originated. There will also be a government oversight body looking at content on OTT platforms, a joint secretary who is ultimately empowered to block content as well. This could all be deeply problematic for freedom of speech and expression, depending on how it is implemented. Will this all end up in court? That is the big question at this stage. But first, let's begin our debate as far as the Nirav Modi case is concerned. Let me just introduce my panel at this stage. Sherbi Panag with us, Aryama Sundara as well, Pooja Mehra, the economy journalist and author, Pinky Anand, senior advocate, and Niharika Karanjawala Mishra. Thank you all very much for being with us. Pinky Anand, let me come to you first. Is this actually, in a sense, a sign that Indian investigators and our legal process is looked upon very seriously in the United Kingdom? Because in the past there have been cases, I'm told, which have been rejected by their courts, but it's been accepted now, it's just a matter of time. Is that your reading?
I think, Vishnu, I couldn't put it better, but let me give it an attempt. I do think this whole process of extradition is something which has to be looked at very closely. We've had so many experiences in the past where some of the senior people who have been involved in crime laundering, in laundering itself, they have been stationed outside the country and we have been unable to get them back. I think the greatest step in this whole process is the strength of India, the strength of the investigating team, the manner in which the issue is pursued, and the manner in which it is perceived by the UK courts. I mean, the factum, look at the judgment. I mean, it's a brilliant judgment, which ultimately, of course, lays down what the extradition law does say, but finds a prima facie case, rejects the typical pleas that are raised by all such accused who are facing extradition proceedings in such cases, and directs the return on an extradition process of Nirav Modi. We have a scamster who has been caught up, who's run away from the country. He needs to be here to face justice. I think amazing victory for the country.
Arima Sundaram, do you believe that that given what we've seen in other cases, the Vijay Mallya case most notably, the process of appeals could actually stretch now for quite a few years?
Look, the fact is, Vishnu, we have a habit of criticizing the delays in the Indian judicial system. Unfortunately, it is a malaise in all judicial systems that there is a process which takes time and has to be covered. Now, in England, it's very clear that this verdict of the magistrate is appealable. So an appeal does lie. To decide that appeal will take its time. But the process has started and law's wheels are turning. And once they're turning, it will have to run its course. Now, what you've seen in Mallya's cases, you've seen how long he can delay it by various appeals. The fact is that it can be done because the judicial system of the country permits that. Looks at the fact that every person accused or any person against whom there's an order should have every right to various legal recourses against it, and that has been granted. Now, we've often criticized the fact that in India these things take so long because they're legal appeal processes. Let me assure you that England is not without its appellate processes also. Now, the fact is the proof of the pudding will be in the eating finally.
Right.
The man may delay it, he may delay it by a year, he may delay it by 2 years. But as long as there is a will, and there's a will to get the person back, which is why, as I said earlier in another channel, I said you must realize there's a difference between extradition and other crimes, where other crimes are between judge, jury, the accused and the prosecutor. So far as extradition is concerned, it is a politico-legal issue. It is both political and legal. And the political will is absolutely necessary for it. And in this case, the political will has shown itself to be more than willing for it, and it's proactive.
Okay.
And now the legal wheel has to turn.
Right.
And so I would say, yes, it's going to take time, but I think it's the end which will justify the path it takes.
Sherbir Panag, how has this been a case which has shown how weak our banking system at one level is, where there were systematic efforts of corruption which were overlooked, there was no oversight mechanism. For example, between March 10, 2011 and when he was finally caught, he managed to get 1,213 guarantees, which ultimately resulted in him defrauding PNB primarily of 14,000 crores.
Vishnu, I think today's, let me start with the good news first. I think today I will completely endorse Ms. Anand's view that we should all be incredibly proud of our law enforcement authorities and the role they've played in getting a successful prosecution and getting a successful extradition judgment against Nirav Modi. This is no easy feat. And if you sort of go back in the history of where we were when in the Gulshan Kumar murder case with Nadeem Saifi and the kind of remarks that the UK courts made against us then to where we stand today, I think this is a remarkable journey, and and our authorities, as well as the fact that this was a cohesive movement between the different ministries working together to make this happen, I think this definitely deserves to be applauded. So I think that's the first point I want to make. The second point, in terms of weaknesses and inherent structural weaknesses within the banking system, I think these found their manifestation in multiple aspects, as when we saw with the non-performing asset crisis, and it's definitely something that the Reserve Bank of India needs to look at. And more importantly, I think we need swift prosecution. It's not just Nirav Modi on one side. We need swift prosecution to happen in India as well, because if we are going to have a long drawn-out trial, the deterrence effect of what officials who in connivance with Nirav Modi and others at Punjab National Bank and potentially other banks engaged with are going to, the deterrence effect is going to be significantly diluted with a delay in prosecution. So I think this is the one part of it. One part of it definitely becomes the extradition piece. The second part is what we need to do back home. Is it a call? Was there a call for major structural reform to prevent fraud and increase our governance mechanisms in terms of both at a banking level, at a law enforcement level, as far as detection, prosecution, investigation of fraud is concerned? It's a wake-up call on all those accounts. It was a wake-up call when the scam broke, not a wake-up call now. But I think with both these pieces combined together, and if we maintain, and in the hope that we maintain the same momentum, we should definitely see a marquee case which would be able to create a deterrent effect for such things to not happen again.
Niharika, how is this a case which was the blatant manner in which it was committed is what amazes the most. At the end of the day, you know, I mean, 14,000 crores or, you know, 1,40,000 crores is just, you keep adding zeros. But the fact of the matter is, it went on and on and on. LOUs were opened in favor of branches of Indian banks. None of these banks abroad actually reported back the manner in which they were supposed to do. Yes, the scam in this one branch was well oiled with this one person allegedly, but the entire system seems to have failed. It failed just a few years back. What does it say about the system itself?
You know, I absolutely agree with you, Vishnu. And one of the things that sets this case apart is not only the quantum that was that is at stake here, but it's also the length of time it went on for. And I'm sure that is something that resonated with the UK court. One important point I wanted to make about the order, since no one has come to it yet, is the fact is a very important thing that the UK court's order brings out today is it clarifies and it stipulates that the condition in Indian prisons is not so terrible and is not one that requires someone to be protected from extradition to the country. This is a very, very significant finding, because then in all extradition cases going forward, it is going to be very hard for people who are trying to escape Indian law to try and use this to move forward. You know, it is a very, very important finding in this order.
No, absolutely, because that's been a question and that's been an issue that's come up in so many cases. Even the Vijay Mallya case, the argument that he would be mistreated if he came over here.
With
Our
every
jails are
case of
not good enough,
extradition,
apparently.
it's going to be one standard argument that
Right.
is now going.
It possibly
that
sets
is
a
now,
precedent for future cases as
absolutely,
well.
it certainly sets
Yeah.
a precedent. Yeah.
Pooja, how is this the story really of, and just tell us a little bit about this man who nobody really knew about. Then in 2017, he ended up becoming ranked 57th in the Forbes list of billionaires. He ended up opening the finest stores in the richest and poshest places on earth through a system of corruption which is unbelievable. He just scammed the entire system. Tell us a little bit about what Nirav Modi actually did.
What Nirav Modi actually did is that, can you hear me?
Yes.
What he did is that he sought loans outside of India from bank branches which were guaranteed by Punjab National Bank. And that is how simple his style of operation was. He, in this scam, some front desk employees of Punjab National Bank, a particular branch, were involved. And they were just maintaining two sets of books. One set of books for inspections and audits, and another set of books which was showing all of this fraud. And that's just how simply they were carrying on with all of this fraud. But this is what he was doing. What I wanted to bring to your notice and your viewers' notice, Vishnu, is that although we had such a huge scam, and congratulations to the investigators and people from India who have argued this this case in London, what have we done about frauds? After this fraud came to light, the last financial stability report of the RBI, which came out, the one that came out in June 2020, does not even mention the word fraud once. The annual report that came out in August 2020 reports that the frauds, bank frauds, doubled. The quantum of frauds has doubled to 1.85 trillion rupees. What steps have been taken to make sure that there are no more Nirav Modis going on right now as we speak is something that we need to also look at and talk about. I don't think enough attention is paid to that.
True, absolutely. I mean, we aren't talking about the larger system, certainly not as much as we should be. But Pinky Anand, let me ask you this, as a lawyer yourself, one of the things you do when you take on a case is, or fight a case, is to look at the mind and the way in which a criminal actually operates. What strikes many people is the brazen manner in which Nirav Modi operated. How could a man carry on for so many years and get 1,230 fake guarantees, knowing that none of the money was his, and expect to get away with it?
I guess you get away as long as you can get away. So that the whole issue is that do we put the system in place to arrest such kind of activities? I mean, you're right. Nirav Modi carried on these activities for a tremendous length of time. I think Niharika or Pooja was also commenting upon that. It is for a long period of time. It shows the flaws in our system. But obviously the collusions with the particular people involved, and that has also come out. So it's not Nirav Modi alone. It is obviously a conglomerate of actions that has been taken in conspiracy with each other. And the fraudulent LOUs were used. It was just a very interesting kind of scenario to see actually. You have one investor who's taken money to give to the other investor, and that goes on, and then ultimately nobody has the money and only Nirav Modi gets the money. So that's why you had the CBI and the ED, the Enforcement Directorate, go after him with the fraud of 14,000 crores and of course money laundering, and you've had other issues also. So it is indeed something that we have to learn. There are the flaws in our system which permit this to happen, and from time to time these scams are the ones which have been responsible for changes in law or in the system or in the procedure or in corporate governance to ensure that this doesn't happen. But I think banking frauds are a big issue as far as this country is concerned, and I'm glad we were able to put this together and to ensure that we have an answerability here, because this is what will put the system back into repair and to renovation.
Arima Sundaram, we aren't going to get our money. India is not going to get its money back, right? PNB is not going to get its money back. ultimately the best case scenario is that this man is brought back to India and jailed. And that's what the law says. But ultimately in getting this money back, the assets back, that's never going to be realized.
Well, let me tell you one thing. What is really worrisome, also almost scary about this whole thing, is the simplicity of the scam. It wasn't a complicated, well thought out, etc. scam. It's very simple. It all came about by getting certain functionaries who were not in the highest echelons. Normally you find in scams, it's people in the highest echelons of the banks or whoever is participant in the scam are involved. It was just getting some people, key personnel, to basically forge documents, to create a situation as though there was sufficient security when there wasn't. So actually it was the simplest of scams. But what is worrisome is that this scam went on for so long and over such a volume before it was even discovered. I won't even call it a scam, I'll call it a simple case of a cheating which is done by getting a couple of people in the bank over on your side. Now, from what you're saying, it is most relevant when you say that the money won't come back. And the reason is very simple. The reason such a scam got found out is because the money ran out. Now, this is the whole problem.
And the man retired. The person who was helping him retired.
The scams come to, exactly. And the scams come to light only when the person is not able to, or not in a financial position to pay back and gets insolvent or bankrupt or otherwise in financial hardship where he cannot set things right. So the moment there's a scam and that is found out, you can invariably take it for granted that the people who participated in it and benefited from it have lost the money and are not going to be in a position to bring it back. All you can do is try to squeeze the stone for as much blood as you can get and get back as much as you can.
Pooja, would you like to add a little bit more to what you were saying earlier on, that when it comes to our banking system, the problems we faced, bank collapses for a different variety of reasons, a system which allows scams like this to take place, has anything really changed over the last 1 year to give people in this country more faith in the stability of banks themselves?
Let me throw the question back at you and ask, have you seen a statement from anybody higher up in government or in the RBI on bank frauds? That, like I said, we haven't seen bank frauds getting discussed in the financial stability report. There was a mention in the annual report of the RBI. Have we seen any new systems being followed by banks? Have we seen any new sorts of style of functioning, or etc., etc., etc.? So that just tells you how serious we are about putting a stop to these kind of frauds.
Niharika, just a last word from you. The way in which this man emerged from nowhere, he wasn't a poor person to begin with, but he wasn't known at all. And to what he became, the story of Nirav Modi is unbelievable. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, and actually it's a little incredible that his meteoric rise didn't set off a few red flags as it was happening itself. It's a little incredible that in a case like this, what it took was an official retiring for all of it to come to light. And as Aryamasa said, for the money running out and him not being able to ultimately pay it back and make good on it, for it all to come to light. Because if you have such a meteoric rise, frankly, honestly, even in a slightly transparent system, one would be able to tell that there's something very wrong here and there's something very amiss here. And I think throughout that process, while investigators have done a great job in the process of extradition, throughout that process, a lot has been missed, and we could have been in a far better position had we caught on to it just a little earlier. And as you said, it's unlikely that the money is ever going to come back to the exchequer. Yeah. Although punishment will be a deterrent to defaulters in the future. But, certainly some red flags should have been noted. Certainly someone should have been alerted to it.
All right. Well, I'm running short on time on this debate. I'd like to thank all of you very much for joining us. It's a big step forward in the process of justice, but perhaps still some time before Nirav Modi is brought back to India. We're going to take a short break. Up after that, the government's new rules on regulation on over-the-top streaming services, digital news, and social media. What does it mean? Mukul Rohtgi also joins us on his views on how these rules will perhaps be very difficult to implement. The government today announced new rules to regulate digital content, featuring a code of ethics and a 3-tier grievance redressal network for news sites and OTT streaming platforms. The Union IT Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad said the rules will empower users of social media. It's called the Guidelines for Intermediaries and Digital Media Ethics Code Rules 2021. It prescribes for the first time how digital news organizations, social media platforms and streaming services will be regulated by the government. The rules, involving a strict oversight mechanism, involve several ministries and a code of ethics that ban content affecting the sovereignty and integrity of India and that which threatens national security. Now, social media giants will be required to appoint India-based compliance officers. If they remove content, they'll be required to inform users, give reasons for taking down their post and hearing them as well. But very significantly, when it comes to social media platforms, they have been asked to provide, potentially to the government, the name of the originator of a post. A lot of them, for example, WhatsApp, would argue that encryption technology, end-to-end encryption technology, means that that is just not possible. So hypothetically, that potential clash between what the law says and what technology can achieve is going to be an area of huge problems. Well, joining us now, Par Gupta. He's a lawyer and executive director of the Internet Freedom Foundation. Mayank Tiwari is a Bollywood writer. We'll be joined by our other panelists in a moment. But apart, firstly, to the entire point of how the government now wants social media platforms to identify where the originator is, who the originator is that technologically even possible?
So, Vishnu, while this may be technologically possible, the first thing to understand is that it undermines one of the core values of what is end-to-end encryption, what is given on instant messaging platforms, let's say WhatsApp, Signal, or Telegram, even in certain settings. So what end-to-end encryption does is that it keeps your conversations private, in which the content of the message does not tie in with the identity of the author. And given the volume of information which is just generated in these instant messaging conversations by you and me, we quite often talk carelessly. We don't think about what we are saying to another person. What this does is it brings in a level of self-censorship, because by tying the content of a message with each author, which is called the originator, even though the rules do not require the government or do not empower the government to demand the text of that message, but under other frameworks it can do it, it essentially means each message which is text, which may be audio, which may be video or picture, it's tied to the identity of a person that, hey, it's a smartphone owned by Apar Gupta, and Apar Gupta sent this message or text across. It will cause a high amount of self-censorship. It will also increase the amount of data which is gathered by all of these technology platforms. This is just one of the requirements. There are other requirements as well on social media companies, including taking best effort basis towards implementing.
And we'll talk about that in a
filters.
moment, because that's the other key part of it. But Mayank, I wanted to come to you as a writer in Bollywood. Do you fear that there is now going to be far greater scrutiny at the level of the government on what you decide to produce?
Definitely, definitely. And again, this entire procedure, I think the one word that stuck with me during the press conference was compliance. And I think government wants everybody to fall into line with respect to what they think is the norm. Because what are these complaints? What are these reactions that are coming to them from people? What are they about? Recently, we saw what happened with the TV show called Tandav, where the producers had to completely apologize for what they had done. The same thing happened to some extent with AK versus AK. And every time we come and discuss this, the issue remains the same, that this is a push to get the industry to toe the line, to deliver content which is not pushing the envelope, which is not talking about the fault lines in society, which is not showing you things that they are as they are. So this is, once the rules comes out, they will be even more complicated, and we will just be tied up in knots. And this is what this procedure is.
Thopali Srinivas is the advisor for the Telangana IT cell of the BJP. He joins us now. Mr. Srinivas, what is it that the government is trying to do over here? Essentially draw a red line on what producers can produce and what they can't, what you can share on social media and what you can't? Who actually decides that?
Thank you, Vishnu, for this lovely debate, and I've been listening to the various panelists, two panelists before me. The compliant word as such can be deciphered in a various meanings. According to me, what the government is trying to say is just follow the guidelines, and we are not controlling anybody's creativity, anybody's content writing, nothing. Just follow it. Make sure that it is catering to the entire universe, the society, without any causing any harm to the bottom line, the guidelines, that is anything inflammatory which can cause any fights or any riots.
What is inflammatory? What is offensive? What is libelous? What is creative license? Who decides that? Because in this document, none of that is defined. I don't even think you can define a lot of these things.
Vishnu, see, it's all, if I say in a subjective matter, you have to have a self-control on what you're doing right now.
But who decides self-control?
Self-control has to be decided by the company itself, which is trying to promote that particular content to a particular platform or social media platform. And you have
to understand... But to whose standards, sir? That's the point. When you say self-control, self-control about what? To what extent? Who decides self-control?
For example, Vishnu, okay, for example, let me tell you like this. You have seen what happened on 26th of January when there was a lot of commotion happening on Red Fort, and where the symbol of our democracy was attacked. Even our union flag also was being attacked there. Now, showing these things in such a light...
That's a violation of the flag. That was potentially a violation of the flag code, and it was violence, which is already taken care of in the law.
Yes.
Right. But I'm sure you saw what the court has had to say about the manner in which people were like Disha Ravi were actually picked up, right? The court was absolutely clear that sedition and things like that cannot be applied. That's a separate argument, right?
See, let me tell you like this. It is not that we are something that BJP is doing for the first time. No. There has been a lot of cases during UPA time also when cartoonists were jailed.
I'm not saying this is UPA versus BJP, but let me go across to Shaina NC, who also joins us, and she's a board member of Prasar Bharati as well. Shaina, one of the regulations over here is actually that in the case of streaming platforms, there will be a categorization, right? So, for example, classification of content will be age-based and genre-based. However, I'm just trying to understand in the context of something people view at home, you can classify it higher. What guarantee is there that that's going to be complied by? That's just what something to advise parents. Is that what the goal is?
So Vishnu, I want to make one opening comment, if you allow me, before I answer your question. There has to be a grievance redressal system for the OTT platform as well as the digital space. Now, this is something that has been raised in Parliament over 50 times.
Right.
There have been over 50 times this question has been raised by individual party members, various viewpoints, and they have said that the digital media up until now has no code of ethics. And this is something which is worrisome. If you look at content of print media or electronic media, you do abide by the Press Council. TV has to follow a program code, as does all other media platforms. And it must be a level playing field. Why should the OTT platform or the digital space be any different from the rest? People have also demanded this on multiple occasions. Forget the 50 questions raised in Parliament. There have been self-regulation mechanisms which have been formed. And obviously, when we talk about the OTT platform, do understand the kind of language being used, the disrespect. We talk about women's dignity, the way women are being portrayed, the abuse, the content which has not even got a plus 13 or plus 16. And OTT platforms will have self-classification.
Okay.
The second tier, both ministers, Ravi Shankar Prasadji and Prakash Javadekar of the Information Broadcasting Ministry, to which we report, has also said that, there will be a body headed by an eminent individual. So it's not about containing freedom, but every freedom has to be responsible freedom. You cannot sit here and say that, it is your right to speak when it comes to disrespecting your country, disrespecting women, using foul language. And I think that the OTT and digital media
So foul language is not allowed.
Disclose information about themselves. It's high time we
But
know.
it ultimately, but China, it really boils down to who decides what is foul and what is not foul? Who decides what is insulting and what is not insulting? Who decides what is, obscene and what is not? What is defamatory in some cases and what is not?
No,
that's the problem, right? It's these definitions.
We have to understand there is a code, there is ethics. There are ethics for online news as well as offline. For the OTT platform, the digital space, today look at the amount
There is something called creative license as well, Shaina.
No, but there is a 3-level grievance redressal mechanism which is independent in nature.
Okay, so that will deal with that.
I don't understand why we must just disagree for the heck of disagreeing when the government is not imposing in any way on your freedom. But if you believe your freedom of expression can be misrepresented, then it is a huge contention.
Okay,
Do understand that this is not the first time we have discussed the OTT platforms and social media platforms and the kind of content.
All right, Shaina, I get your point. I get the point that you're making, and you've actually made many of them. Jawahar Sarkar joins us as well. Do you believe that this explanation being provided by the government now is adequate, that there is a regulatory mechanism, there's a process through which people, if they have a problem, can say they have a problem, and vice versa? It listens to all sides. Is that good enough for OTT platforms?
See, there are 2 separate categories of information we are dealing with. And the rules also deal with it in 2 separate categories. One is what we call the social media intermediaries. So that will be WhatsApp, Twitter, and others, where the IT Act has some powers, but it is drawn extensively from different sections. It's almost like a Chaturbhuja Durga who needs powers from various places to empower herself. But never mind. So that is one place where they are using the word significant social media intermediaries. In short, platforms. Platforms have to reveal, platforms have to do this, platforms have to do that, and we can take it up to the originators. The originator thing is not ipso facto contestable, because there are originations that are happening of a very dangerous nature. The point is, will it be used? You see, everyone else has seen the government from outside or at the fringe. I have worked for it. I've been with the Minister of INB for 5 years, so I know how we think, how our people think. Now, this is a hegemonic act. Let's be very clear about that. So I've dealt with part 1, where social media is subject to a series of controls under the IT Act. We can get into the details. Some I have already explained. The second one is more dangerous, because the second one is the only space that is left to us, the digital online media, digital online press. That is the only space left to us, because the entire mainstream media, save 2 or 3 newspapers, have capitulated. So that is a place where real facts and real views are articulated, and it's circulated among those who want to see it. It's not imposed. Now, there they have brought in this 3-tier level of...
with government regulation is the last point, right?
Government regulations.
And a joint secretary who can actually make a call and is empowered apparently to pull content.
The empowered thing is a committee of 8 officers, civil servants, bureaucrats, put it whatever way you will. But 8 officers will sit in judgment, and here this where the control over digital online media is concerned.
But there's an eminent person as well. It's not just bureaucrats.
8 of them will be sitting. Hang on. On this thing, it will go to a committee, interministerial committee of 8 officers from representing 8 departments of the government of India, and they will be adjudicating whether this thing is okay or possible or not. But remember,
Yes.
A new ploy has been brought about, and this is legitimization of a tactics that we call proxy grievance. Proxy grievance is the type of grievance where somebody goes and files an FIR that what Vishnu Som said hurts my religious sentiment.
Right.
It's not government.
So
it goes by
what you're
proxy.
basically saying is that the opportunities over here for contesting content are very easy, and sometimes frivolous complaints.
Yes,
can
everybody,
be a huge problem.
there's an Pandora's box.
All right,
that's been opened now.
Mr. Sarkar, I need to wrap this up over here. I've got Mukul Rohatgi as well on this. I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us and sharing those views. Let's listen into what Mukul Rohatgi, the senior Supreme Court lawyer, had to say about some of the guidelines in the new rules. Sir, if we look at social media, the rule says that all social media companies have to tell users not to host defamatory, obscene, pornographic, pedophilic, invasive of another person's privacy, etc., information, or even insulting, libelous, inconsistent. How does one define insulting? How does one define inconsistent? How does one even define privacy in the context of social media?
Now, Vishnu, you have raised a very, very important question. And this question transcends from regulatory control into invasions of privacy. That is a very, very prickly subject. But let me first tell you, your users must know that whether it is Facebook, whether it is Twitter, whether it's WhatsApp, these social media platforms are mere virtual platforms on which people come and express their views. It's not like making a film,
right,
where a director makes a film, puts the actors in it, tells a story, right, wrong, and has various nuances in a film. You may have a rape, you may have a murder, you may have a comedy. Now here, it's a virtual platform which is neutral. We are in law under the IT Act. By we, I mean the social sites. They are called intermediaries. They don't decide the question you have raised. What is insulting? What is in bad taste? What is in good taste? What may be a joke to me, may be a flirtatious joke to me, may be seen in a bad light by somebody. You know, something like Lady Chatterley's lover.
Right.
So firstly, I am not a judge, and the Supreme Court has already ruled in a case called Shreya Singhal,
yes,
who's also a lawyer, that the intermediaries cannot be judges to decide this is offensive or insulting.
Yeah.
It is either for a government authority to decide or a court to decide. Basically, a court to decide.
But they've overruled that. Now it's legislation, right? So
Yeah,
Shreya
so
Singhal doesn't stand.
So every day we are doing cases where a person goes to a court and says, look, so-and-so has posted offensive pictures about me or my friend or my family, and this should be taken down. So the court orders that it should be taken down, and Facebook and WhatsApp, I've been appearing for these social sites for some years now, that these sites, they take it down. There is no problem. They never contest. But they cannot be a judge. And the Supreme Court says, so firstly, if the onus is on us, it is very difficult for us to, I mean these sites, for these sites to discharge the onus. Now, if I can't discharge the onus, the second question. Now, I noticed that they say that you must be able to find out who is the originator of WhatsApp.
Right.
Right. Now,
that means disclosing identity.
Yeah, so now let's examine it a little further. In a WhatsApp, not Facebook, in a WhatsApp message, I send you a message.
Yeah, it's encrypted, and you can't do it, right?
Yes, it is completely encrypted.
Yeah, the information is not with the servers of WhatsApp at all. It doesn't exist. It's user to user.
An affidavit with the Supreme Court that WhatsApp itself cannot read the contents of the message. Now the second question. If I send you a message, you know it has come from me. But if you send the same message to another friend,
yes,
maybe it is flirtatious, maybe it is bad, your friend will know that you have sent it, but not that Mr. Rohatgi was the originator of the message.
So it'll be a wild goose chase, right?
Yeah, so now under the new regulation, if the originator has to be made available, the originator's number, then on the WhatsApp which I send to you, my number will come, and when you send the WhatsApp further, my number will still remain pasted, and if it has gone 100 times, my number will always remain pasted as the man who sent it and is being repeatedly forwarded. So here comes an issue of privacy. Should, in fact, a question has been raised in a case in the Supreme Court filed by an MP called Mr. Binoy Viswam, that nobody should in fact know that I have sent a message to Vishnu. Forget the contents. The fact that I have sent you a message is also an aspect of privacy.
Right.
So, you know, this privacy issue has now been settled by a 9-judge bench of the Supreme Court to say that privacy sits in fundamental rights under the Constitution.
Right.
So I'm not saying that regulation by itself is a bad thing. I wish there could have been self-regulation, so the government wouldn't have stepped in. But now that the government has stepped in for security of the nation, etc., or whatever, I don't say that it is a bad thing. But I don't think it has been fully thought out. It's kind of a little hasty.
No, but Mr. Rohatgi, let me ask you this, because you asked me you raised an important point. It just seems that every other clause, so many clauses in this entire 29 page document refers to a threat to unity, integrity, defense, security of sovereignty of India, friendly relations with foreign nations, public order. These can at one level always be excuses. You can subsume everything under national security and say it is a threat, right? We can do a defense story and somebody can say it is a threat, right? So information gets shut down. Is that not a worry? That tomorrow a WhatsApp or a Facebook can be told this information is wrong, it affects us because of friendly relations with another country, shut it down, shut down the message. And therefore anything can be shut down.
No, and also see, the worry is that it is up to an offense of 5 years. Right? Yes. That also I saw. Now that also is not very easy. You know, it's not black and white. But I mean, let me put it this way. The bottom line is this, that some amount of regulation is fine, because nobody can have a completely unregulated business.
Right.
So if TV is regulated, you are regulated, then even an OTT must be regulated.
Yes.
So that's a level playing field. So far, so good. But in that business of regulation, you cannot trench upon other rights.
Right.
For this encryption, which I am saying, which WhatsApp proudly claims from end to end, this encryption will have to break, because you will have to then store as to who sent what.
Yeah.
And you have a data protection law which says you can't store any material.
Right.
Rightly so. Now here you will be bound to store. How will you know the originator is unless you store? And store what? Billions and millions of messages.
And the other issue, of course, affects OTT platforms. They propose to set up self-regulation at the level of the company, a self-regulatory body including, right? And third, an oversight mechanism where a joint secretary, as I understand it, has a right to pull content, to order something to be blocked or shut down. Again, when it comes to a freedom of expression, when it comes to, say, content on Netflix or Amazon Prime or what have you, is that not going to be a big problem going forward?
It will be. My only hope is, you know, all these will go to court. People who want privacy will go to court. People who want the regulations will go to court. OTTs like Netflix or whatever may go to court. It will ultimately have to be resolved. But my only hope is that the regulation is not ham-handed, is not heavy, and at the end of the day, you don't use a hammer to kill a fly.
Right.
That's how I would end it.
I agree, sir. The implementation of this is where, you know, it could be potentially problematic. But I'd like to thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.